Air. In France, we visit the Pyrenees town of Biarritz, site of the world's first fibre-optic community. In Germany, we take a preview look at the lifestyle in store for divers for when mining on the seabed begins later this century. And in Australia, the world's second oldest profession, winemaking, begins to incorporate computers in the control of fermentation. There's some of the reports on Towards 2000 tonight.
Getting a taxi in a big city can be an epic event at the best of times. And once you've found one, you often find that the taxi driver's a bit testy. You tend to inherit his daily hassles. And also the radio noise in the car is a bit intrusive as well. In Sweden's three largest cities, Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö, they've installed a computerised taxi system that will probably change the driver-passenger relationship forever to one of peaceful coexistence. A computerised system that's 30% more profitable, and they guarantee that you can get a cab in peak periods in under 5 minutes. It's a great day for a walk here in sunny Gothenburg, but let's put the system to the test.
Hello, taxi.
Yes, good morning. I'd like a taxi. Yes, near the Chez Ami restaurant on Parkgarten. I think the pronunciation's right.
Yes, that's the right pronunciation.
The switchboard operator with the new computer cab system, known as Taxi 80, is courteous, even friendly. The reason being there's none of the nerve-fraying hunt to find a free vehicle or to find a radio channel that isn't clogged with chatter. The receptionist now just types names, addresses and any special instructions into the computer and waits for the next call. It's peak hour on Monday morning, but 4 minutes later, the taxi arrives.
Hi, fine.
I'm from Australian television.
I see. Hi.
How you doing?
Where do you want to go?
Oh, let's go on the tourist street.
Sure.
That'd be nice.
Fine.
First impressions of the system is just how quiet the cab is to ride in. There's no radio noise unless the driver chooses to speak to the base. All communication is achieved by push-button responses from the cab to base via a microcomputer. As the driver travels around the city, he updates his position by pressing buttons on the console. The city is split into sectors and subzones that are given numeric codes. The driver quickly memorises them, but there's a map prompt on the steering wheel.
With the Taxi 80 system, the computer knows at all times where the taxis are and where the customers are. It knows where the customers are because of demographic data that's stored in its memory. And it knows where the cabs are because the drivers must at all times update their position as they travel around the city. The computer looks at this information and then dispatches work efficiently and unerringly. And that does away with time-wasting trips and wrong addresses, and the drivers don't have to go into a frenzy chasing work. They know that the system is equitable and that they'll get a fair proportion of the work available.
The designers of Taxi 80, Volvo and Ericsson radio systems, say there was some initial resistance from drivers on the grounds that doing away with the radio was depersonalising. But after a few months, most of the detractors had agreed that driver stress levels had declined. When work is dispatched from base, only the car concerned receives the name and address from its dot matrix printer in the dashboard. All bidding for work is done with a series of coded push-button responses that can only be interpreted by the base computer. From the moment the Taxi 80 system begins operating, it's building up intelligence of traffic peaks and troughs. It builds on all the data amassed by the previous radio dispatches. After the system's been in use for some time, it can predict where cars should be positioned to be most likely to intercept a fare. The longer the system is installed, the more accurate it becomes. Supervisors only have to monitor the system's progress. But should a special event like a football match be imminent, the system can be reprogrammed to cope with the expected traffic demands.
Volvo and Ericsson claim that the system will increase the operator's efficiency by about 300%. And to give you an idea of just how efficient, you can order a taxi 14 days in advance, and 8 minutes before you're due to leave, the computer automatically dispatches a vehicle.
I wonder whether you'd be prepared to trust your present taxi service to get you to the airport with that sort of notice.
It was in 1860 that Eugène, the wife of Napoleon III, first came to Biarritz to get away from it all. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor also opted for this sleepy little village on the edge of the Pyrenees to escape the newshounds. Now, though, this tiny town is being thrust into a communications revolution, its inhabitants having access to the very latest in communications technology, fibre optics. Biarritz was chosen for this multimedia experiment by the French telecommunications agency PTT. Chosen not so much because of its international fame, but more for its technological isolation. Biarritz has been a media virgin. Resting in the shadow of the Pyrenees, it's been virtually impossible up to now to receive good quality television or stereo radio. For better or worse, all that is over. Biarritz is now wired for sound, vision and information in the world's first fibre-optic mass media village. Optic fibres, or more specifically, minuscule, non-absorbent glass tubes down which laser light waves are sent, carrying coded light messages from electronic signals. Using the light of the laser in this way, electronic signals, such as those used to give sound and image to a domestic television set, will travel faster and unhindered by electrical interference. Compared with this bulky cluster of copper cable, just one optic fibre can transmit all the signals carried by the conventional coaxial cable. The advantages are enormous. As they're made of glass, optic fibres are non-corrosive. They'll be cheaper to construct as well as maintain than copper cable. Their primary component is in the sand on every beach, and once an underground network is established, it could last, well, almost forever. So, from within the bowels of this PTT headquarters in Biarritz, the network begins. Plastic-coated glass fibres carrying messages using light as the medium. A vision had by Alexander Graham Bell more than a century ago when he developed the photophone. This is the centrale, and from this room, two-way contact along fibre-optic cables is established with the subscribers to the system. Each subscriber is allocated 2 optic fibres, one for transmission and one for receiving. Along one transmission optic fibre, it's possible to transmit the signals for 100 different television stations, about 15 radio signals including high-fidelity stereo sound, and the sound and vision for a videophonic system. For the fortunate 1,500 subscribers to the Biarritz experiment, literally a whole world of information will be channeled into their lounge rooms. Before leaving the centrale, the electronic signals go through a type of transformer where they're converted to light pulses. In each subscriber's house, a black box containing a photodetector reconverts these flashes of light to smooth electrical signals. The result for the Biarritz subscriber is television à la carte, with 16 stations now online.
À partir du 2 et jusqu'au 11 et puis également
And there's this, the first fully operational video phone network, where, if they wish, users can see each other as they speak via a camera attached to the unit.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.
It was more than 100 years ago that Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, first conceived of the idea of transmitting sound via light waves. In 1880, following his own experiments, he wrote, "I have heard the sun laugh and cough and sing." Now, in 1984, here in Biarritz, it's the light of laser tiny glass fibres that brings you this sound and this vision.
A plethora of other information services has been fed into the domestic information system, including links with the Weather Bureau, with travel agencies and domestic airlines. The subscriber can now bypass a whole range of service industries and directly tap into the computer at a particular company headquarters. One computer speaking to another over the phone. The global village has finally arrived in Biarritz. For richer or poorer remains to be seen. But one thing is certain in this sleepy little resort on the edge of the Pyrenees. All is changed utterly.
Ever since people began going underwater seriously, whether for scientific exploration, searching for treasure, industrial work, for military purposes or recreation, the trend has always been to go deeper and deeper. But the deeper you go, the more complex and dangerous the details of human life support become. The need for continual research into diving techniques, equipment, and the physiological and psychological effects of higher pressure on divers has become crucial to their survival. At the West German Air and Space Research Institute, on the outskirts of Cologne, an underwater medicine laboratory has been established with one of the world's largest and best equipped deep-water diving simulators as its key element. Well, the whole thing is set up as 4 interconnecting pressurized chambers that can simulate the conditions that exist in the open ocean at depths of up to 1,000 meters. The first chamber looks like one, but actually it's 2. There's an access lock at the far end, and then living quarters for divers at this end. This one here duplicates a detachable diving bell. The 4th chamber, which is actually called the wet pot and is built on the floor beneath me here, is actually able to simulate the conditions that a freely operating diving bell like this might encounter in the open ocean. But perhaps you can see it a little more clearly in these illustrations. In an open sea situation, an oceanographic research vessel might be set up something like this. Divers breathing special gases under extreme pressure could operate from a diving bell at great depths, returning to the safety of the bell when necessary, and then be lifted up to the surface, still under pressure, to be connected on board ship to the recompression chamber. In the simulator, the recompression chamber and the diving bell are virtually the same as those that are used at sea. But the big chamber beneath, the wet pot, which is filled with water, can also be pressurized so that it is equivalent, as I said, to being anything up to 1,000 meters beneath the surface. It becomes, in effect, a small piece of deep ocean from which divers can operate under controlled conditions. The interior of the wet pot is some 3 meters in diameter by about 4 meters high. When experiments and trials are carried out, it takes a morning to fill it. It holds around 20,000 litres, close to 20 tons of water, which can be salt or fresh, as well as heated or cooled to almost any desired temperature. During experiments, divers enter the wet pot through the floor access port in the diving bell simulator. They are breathing whatever special mixture of gases require testing, and the diver is in direct radio communication with the scientist controlling the experiment from outside.
Nicht zu erkennen.
But other sensing devices to monitor various aspects of the diver's health status, temperature, respiration, blood pressure and so on, can also be fitted with the aim in the long term of improving human performance underwater and extending the limits of time and space in which divers at great depths can operate.
Well, under test conditions or in the open ocean, the pressure inside this bell would be as high as 100 atmospheres, and that would effectively keep the water level down in the bell so that divers could come and go as they please. The controls here are for the gas supply to the diver from the mothership, and that comes via an umbilical cord to the bell and then down through there to the diver in the open ocean. Here's the communication system by which they can speak from the mothership to the diver and also to the bell. And when a job is finished, the diver can come up through the bell, the bottom there, as I've just done, and then the bottom door is locked, comes up, and then this door comes down and closes, and that effectively seals off this bell so that it can be lifted up to the mothership, on board the mothership, and then attached to the living chamber. And when that's done, you can then just open this door like that and go into the living chamber. And this is what the living chamber looks like. This is the second door in the lock, and it leads into this first part, which is actually just a washroom, toilet, that sort of setup, and also where you can hang up your wetsuits and so on when you come inside. Then it leads back into this area, which is the main section, which contains the bunks, 4 bunks that can be laid down. They've got their headset communication with the outside. And that's about all there is. There's a fair amount of monitoring and testing equipment up here, not testing, but also supply for the gas regulators and so on, more intercom connections with the outside. And then there's that big door there, which weighs as much as a small car, and that's the only way to get out. But you have to wait anything up to 3 weeks or a month sometimes to get out of here. And in that context, there's no cooking facilities at all in here. So what they've got to do is to rely completely on food from outside that comes in through this access lock here.
Of course, a test situation over a long period also requires support staff on the outside to be constantly monitoring the environment of the living chamber to ensure that not only the food and other requirements of the divers are met, but also the temperature and pressure parameters and the gradually changing gas mixtures which will eventually bring the air the divers are breathing back to normal.
Well, you certainly wouldn't want to be claustrophobic. If you were, after 3 weeks in there, you'd be a candidate for the funny farm. And it's not the sort of thing I'd want to be doing all year round, that's for sure. But in purely scientific terms, the Titan simulator will almost certainly provide the sort of information on deep ocean exploration that in the future could save lives.
You know, the Australian wine industry is a pretty diverse sort of bunch, if you'll excuse the pun. It ranges from struggling soldier settlers through hobby vignerons and small boutique wineries to medium to large-scale companies that are locked in epic marketing and discount battles to stay afloat. Well, an example of a medium-sized company is Yalumba here at Anguston. They're one of the last remaining companies in Australia that are fully family-owned. And then waiting in the wings are the corporate raiders, the multinationals that could literally buy this piece of picturesque real estate out of petty cash. Well, Yalumba have been one of the first companies to realise that their best defence is efficiency, to be able to make better wines more consistently at a good price. And efficiency means the microprocessor. When the grape is picked, either by hand or by a mechanical harvester, it's possible the grape's skin is broken. The heat of the day speeds the oxidisation process, which begins immediately, drastically affecting the final flavour of the wine. Now Yalumba pick their grapes in the dead of night. The fruit is shaken from the vines, and those grapes that are broken are lightly misted with the anti-oxidising agent sulphur dioxide as they go up the conveyor belt. As dawn breaks, the freshly picked fruit is rushed to the grape laboratory for evaluation. Because Yalumba blend their grapes from over 75 vineyards from quite different soils and climates, a core sample is taken to make an assessment of the quality of the consignment. Chemically, the quality they're searching for is depth of flavour. They're also interested in the amount of grape sugar, the fruit's acid, which has a lot to do with the crispness of the wine's finish on the palate, and the pH. There'll be around 6,000 consignments like this during the harvest, And it's at this stage that the computer lightens the workload.
Where's this one from, Robin?
Piggies?
All the requirements of a good grape can now be logged, so the winemaker knows what to expect from each vineyard and how to blend them to make the most consistent wine. The blending takes place at the crusher. Grapefruits mixed to take advantage of their various characteristics of sugar, flavour, pH and acid. The juice now enters the first stage of the steady-state continuous fermentation. First, the juice must be cooled via these giant chillers to 5 degrees Celsius to reduce oxidisation and the blended juice character remonitored. Prior to steady-state fermenting, there was batch fermentation, where the juice was pumped into these 24 vats to interact with yeast to produce alcohol. The temperature of the reaction was controlled slightly haphazardly by connecting various vats in rotation to the chiller. Labour-intensive and timing was crucial. This is the batch fermentation process. That's the traditional way of making white wine, which basically dates back centuries. In simple terms, what you do is you add juice to these 200,000 litre vats and then yeast. And then there's a reaction between the yeast, which feeds on the sugar, which gives you alcohol. Unfortunately, a byproduct of that chemical reaction is an increase in temperature. And heat is the enemy of good wine. And if the reaction starts to get out of control, what happens is that you actually start to lose the aromas and flavour in the wine. In the new steady-state fermentation reaction, the temperature of the yeast-sugar reaction is computer-controlled by pumping fresh juice into the fermenter when required. This is possible because the computer knows at all times how many yeast cells are interacting with the sugar, how much alcohol is being produced, and the vat's temperature gradient. The continuous steady-state fermentation process offers winemakers controls and flexibilities that they could only dream of 3 years ago. It offers control over the temperature of the juice to within 0.1 of a degree. It offers controls on the amount of yeast and their activity. And there are dramatic improvements in flavour retention because the aroma compounds that would normally be vented and wasted into the air can now be recondensed and pumped back into the system. There are considerable advantages to the steady-state system. The whole process of winemaking can be sped up or slowed down without loss of quality. The plant can now easily cope with large amounts of grapes being harvested and arriving at around the same time. Yolumba's computerised fermentation wines are going to be released as convenience wines. Now, that's a euphemism for bulk casks and flagons. And initially they're going to release a Spätlese, a Rhine Riesling and a Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, how does it taste, I hear you ask? Well, this is my big chance to gaze into the middle distance and play the bon vivant. Well, it's dangerously quaffable. It's smooth, it doesn't have a tannin bitey finish, and probably there's only one thing missing, and that's my favourite convenience food. Bellissimo. Cheers.